Hello, hello, hello. Let's get this loaded before we start to go into in depth with it. I want it to be known it skipped from 4 seconds to 14 seconds in like a blink of so I don't think that's that big of a deal. All right. I think that everything is working, and I think that we're here for another Ring of Honor TV review. And if I'm being honest, this is a pretty big episode of Ring of Honor on HonorClub, as we have two massive title matches that take place on this week's episode. But before we get into this week's ROH review, I do have a couple of quick notes and kind of banter points that I wanted to make note of. If you're here strictly for the ROH review, I do respect that, and we'll put the timestamp of when the review starts in the description. All right, thing one. This is something that's bothered me because it happened right before I started watching this week's ROH, and it lingered on my mind throughout most of the episode. But this week was Prime Week on Amazon Prime, and I made the decision that if something was not dramatically on sale, or, and this is the kind of the main part, or in my browsing history, then I didn't want it. And there was one thing in particular that I really wanted, and I had 5 of them in my browsing history, and only one of them went on sale, and that was a new Green Bay Packers hoodie. And so it went on sale for $35. It was in my cart, and when it was in my cart, it said there are only 4 left in stock, and at that moment, I ordered it. That was Tuesday night. And then right before I started watching this episode of ROH, I was notified that, hey, you weren't charged, but we're canceling your order. And it really bummed me the fuck out. Because I've also made a rule. This is a very random rule, but I think it's one that should be respected. If I see something that is on sale, so this hoodie was normally $50. So it went on sale for $35. I'm not spending the $50 on the hoodie. I'm only going to spend the $35. So now that it's not on sale, it's actually not in stock, but in this hypothetical scenario, I'm not spending $50 on this hoodie, which has set me back because it is it's not extremely difficult, but I'm being very picky with it. But it's being a pain in my ass to find a replacement Green Bay Packers hoodie for this situation. And it really bummed me out. And I didn't want to point this out. So that is thing one. That should be the only negative from this video as well. That being said, these two kind of go intact, but almost the entire year that I've done this entire year that I've done ROH reviews, AEW Fight Forever has been on y'all's screen because I issue with my camera and I use this as a backup plan to just stream, do the review over the stream, and then upload it. It's a little bit easier that way, and no one has really complained about it. If you have a problem with it, I do apologize, but again, I've kind of been doing it for a year. It's a fitting week to do this and mention this, that also my browsing history was an Xbox headset. I did order it as well, so my headset, anytime I listen, doesn't give issues. If y'all, again, think there are issues with it, I apologize, but nothing's ever really been said about it. The other thing, this is the main reason I was bringing this all up, is that this week, very, 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 very randomly, AEW Fight Forever has a free trial on Xbox Game Pass, and they made note of it on this week's Dynamite. So take advantage of that. I've came to the realization that I've been on this game once a week since it has came out, which is a pretty insane thing because there's a lot of negative feedback towards this game, but I'm not one of those people that have provided that. I will admit, probably the thing that has bummed me the most about this game is the creation unit was an utter disaster and kind of disappointing. Other than that, I genuinely enjoyed this game, and again, it's been out for 2 years, over 2 years now, and I would imagine I could say I got my money's worth. So that is thing 1, 2, and 3. Speaking of games, cheap promo. I started my GM on WWE 2K25 on AHS Plays. We did 2 episodes this week. I'd appreciate it if y'all checked it out. Had a lot of fun doing both and obviously plan on continuing it and looking forward to the next episode. And lastly, this is a very good episode to do this, but we're starting a new notebook. Last week's episode, I had 1 page left. I wrote some random shit on that last page, so now we have moved on to a new notebook. And a perfect start for it because now we're here for Ring of Honor, episode number 136 on HonorClub. I wrote the timestamp down at 5 minutes and 30 seconds of the review starting. So, we know what the main event is. We have 2 massive matchups in the opening contest and the main event. I would say, as well, since the episode before All Out, I didn't really enjoy that episode. But since then, so the last 2 episodes have been very enjoyable for ROH. And I've been hyping this one up before even talking about it. So we've got a little bit of a good streak going on for ROH TV. So for review purposes and just general purposes in general, kind of a good thing. So let's get into it. Our opening contest this week, we're going to CMLL, Ring of Honor World Title matchup that happened at last Friday's CMLL event, and a rematch from Death Before Dishonor. This matchup is Bandido versus Hechicero 2. We got a technical approach to start between the two, with the two applying a surfboard lock in the center of the ring. Hechicero takes a headlock in the ring to the apron, and this sets up a dive to the outside by him. Also on the outside, Bandido is tossed onto the barricade, and his arm is shut into the door of the corner of the barricade. Again, on the barricade, Hechicero delivers a big drop kick off of the apron, but it kind of seems to do more damage to himself as Bandido is able to get up before him and hit a shooting star press off of the apron. In the ring, Bandido hits a frog splash that gets a 2 count. Hechicero lands a backbreaker. Bandido lands a body slam followed by a 450 splash. A wristlock attempt by Hechicero damages Bandido's arm a lot more, with the trainer coming in to pop the shoulder while the camera is turned. He tries to tape Bandido's shoulder up, but it does not stay on for very long, especially with Hechicero going right back on the attack. We got a Poison Rana in the ring by Bandido that gets a 2 count. An armbar by Hechicero is followed by a head scissors driver that gets a very close 2 count, with a one-arm Bandido landing an X-knee, but he cannot deliver on the 21 plex. The two are battling in the center of the ring at this point, where Bandido is able to pull off a roll-up to end the matchup. So, almost at the same level of their Death Before Dishonor match. Kind of at, depending on who you really... I enjoyed this match. I enjoyed it. I will say the finish kind of felt a little bit weird, but something like this was kind of needed with Bandido's arm being injured. It was going to be extremely difficult, close to impossible for him to do the 21 plex. So I will say the finish felt a little weird, and they started talking over the crowd, so I feel that a lot of the crowd noise was piped in. So this would have been a better viewing experience Friday night, but I enjoyed the matchup overall, and it was a big-time matchup that they didn't even really need to have on ROH TV, so I'm not going to complain, and I appreciate them showing this matchup on ROH TV. And I was talking to somebody earlier this week, and they said, "You should be. Are you happy that Bandido is legitimately Wrestler of the Year?" And if we're being honest, there's a lot of people that need to be in that discussion, and we have 3 months left in this year, and especially with the Continental Classic hopefully taking place in December, that is kind of the cherry on top, because a lot of AEW wrestlers that are vying for this Wrestler of the Year race, if we're being honest, that Continental Classic can help them out dramatically. But when you look at Bandido, he is a key factor in saving and making Ring of Honor ROH again, which was a dramatic feat. He took the world title from Chris Jericho, which I feel that since Bandido has been champion, you kind of forget that Jericho was the previous champion before that. So, obviously, yes, I am very happy that Bandido is has a very strong case of being Wrestler of the Year. He's one of the main people to enjoy while watching Dynamite and love his tag team with Brody King. They have a tag team title matchup set up at Wrestle Dream next week against Kazuchika Okada and Kadosuke Takeshita, which will be a rematch from this previous episode of Dynamite, but this time around the tag titles will be on round. Speaking of Wrestle Dream, another cheap plug. Should have my predictions involved with next week's ROH TV review, but we got this episode to go through before we get to it next week. So, overall, thank you for putting this matchup on this week's episode, because anytime you get to see Bandido, it is a treat, especially in a ROH World title matchup. Next matchup is Beef versus Shane Taylor. Before this matchup does take place, this is the other thing. I knew I was forgetting to mention something, is that they have taped a lot of matches for ROH last week and this week, because they had the Dynamite taping and a Collision taping. So there are a lot of matches taped for ROH over the past 2 weeks, and this episode only had 5 matches, and one of them wasn't even supposed to be taped for ROH TV. So I don't know exactly when a lot of this stuff will air. I know that once a AEW pay-per-view gets added in the mix, which will happen next week, Wrestle Dream predictions next week, I had to plug it again. It kind of gets a little bit muffled and a bit confusing and whatnot. So I don't know when exactly all these matches will air, but I can at least say a lot has been taped for ROH. And I was mainly mentioning this because a matchup that I do believe was taped, and I didn't read the spoilers entirely, was a 6-man tag team title matchup with Skyflight versus Shane Taylor Promotions. And this segment, this backstage hype video, kind of reassured it, as Skyflight own a victory over Shane Taylor Promotions and won another matchup against them, because now they're the 6-man tag team champions and they think that they are capable of taking those titles from them. But before you get to that, you got to do Shane Taylor versus Beef, which is the matchup happening on this episode. There's no code of honor. Instead, we get right-hand exchanges between the two until Beef is knocked to the outside and attacked by the rest of Shane Taylor Promotions while the referee is distracted. In the ring, Beef fires back with a right hand, but Shane Taylor does the same as well, following it with a big splash for a 2 count. We get one more right hand to end the matchup, with Shane Taylor picking up the victory. After the matchup, Shane Taylor Promotions attack Beef, when just like last week, Beef's cousin, Anthony Henry, and JD Drake of the Workhorsemen come out to save the day, as he was attacked last week by LFI. And LFI, they're like, are we doing what happened last week again? As LFI come out after the Workhorsemen do and attack everybody with their championship belts. So I would imagine we're supposed to get the Workhorsemen versus LFI for the ROH Tag Team Championships, which should happen at some point. Next matchup is Viva Van versus Billy Starks. Lots of wrist locks early between the two, with Starks being more aggressive as the matchup goes on. She misses on a swan dive when Van gets her knees up, but Starks distracts the referee using a closed fist and hits a swan dive afterwards to pick up the victory. The one thing I'll say is, obviously with ROH, a lot of these matches are squash. I don't like saying squash matches, because they are never really advertised, or the word squash match never comes into mind. So a lot of times it's either so-and-so in action or enhancement matches. And Billy Starks is one of those people. And the main thing that I'm trying to get at is, with a lot of these matches, it is essentially, again, a squash matchup, one-sided. That's not really the case with Billy Starks. Over this past year of her competing on ROH, a lot of her matches have been back and forth, and it makes it a bit more enjoyable and a little, I can't say unpredictable, because I'm always going to imagine that she wins, because most of the time she's going to be against people that are not signed to the company. But this is just another example of that. So I do appreciate that's how she is used on ROH. Now, 2 very weird backstage segments. The first one being another episode of QTV. People hated QTV when it was on AEW TV. I don't know if they feel the same about it on ROH TV. And it's still funny that they put Harley Cameron in it, even though she kind of is portraying that she doesn't want to be involved with it, even though she still is. But the discussion point this week is that Big Boom AJ is about to celebrate his 1 year in AEW, and he has a matchup lined up at Full Gear which is not the next pay-per-view, so it's kind of weird for them to be promoting it this early, against Roppongi Vice, where he needs a partner because Roppongi Vice will not fight his son as well. And so Big Boom AJ needs to find a partner, and he comes to QTV QT Marshall, who runs QTV. And QT Marshall was holding a double chunk chocolate chip cookie. He doesn't ask him to be his partner. It would kind of be a full circle moment because that was his first opponent in AEW. But it's also, something I don't think people were clamoring to see. But I don't think the story is finished. We get another segment as well. This one is from this previous Monday Night Football's game with the Jacksonville Jaguars, as before the game, a tailgate was happening with the frat house, which fits their vibe so much, obviously. So the frat house were at the Jacksonville Jaguars game. A lot of AEW talents were because they had to work in Jacksonville the very next night. I imagine the vibes were good because the Jaguars did win that game. But the most notable thing that came out of this celebration is the frat house trying to attack a man that did look like Andy Reid. And if you understand football, I think you would get a good chuckle out of it. We get a quick matchup up next with Angelico and Serpentico, the Spanish Announce Project, taking on Logan Cruz and Tayshaun Perez. It's spelled like Tayshaun Prince. Shout out to him. Pistons legend. Played for the Grizzlies as well. I think he still works for the Grizzlies. I don't know. It kind of overchanged. Regardless, it's spelled like Tayshaun, but it's pronounced Tayshaun. Tayshaun Perez and Logan Cruz versus the Spanish Announce Project. Perez and Angelico start the matchup before quickly tagging out. Serpentico is double-teamed while he's in the match until he tags back out, with Angelico applying a Guevara lock to pick up the victory. So now before we get to our main event, we do have to make note that on next week's ROH, one matchup that is for certain, and is one that I'm going to say I'm interested for one opponent. Shannon Moore versus Blake Christian. If you tune in to my ROH reviews every week, I'm not the biggest Blake Christian fan. He's all right, but I will admit that at some point he will challenge for the ROH World title. I'm not watching a Blake Christian ROH World title run. I don't even want to think about it, even though I've kind of put it out there. I have always enjoyed Shannon Moore. Loved him in 3 count, and you're probably thinking, you were watching WCW 2000. I went back and watched a lot of effing WCW. 3 count, and I think a lot of people agree with me, are one of the main highlights of 2000 WCW. Go watch Starrcade 2000. They have the best matchup in the Triangle Ladder match. I enjoyed him as a little MFer with Matt Hardy, which stands for Attitude Follower. And probably the weirdest thing, when I was a kid and I was watching TNA 2010, and Shannon Moore was there in Ink. I was like, I've always liked Shannon Moore. So, Ink. So, it is very enjoyable, weird, and a cool thing that Shannon Moore will be competing on next week's ROH. Now, we're here for the main event. IWGP Women's title matchup. Sareee versus Alex Windsor. Now, I will apologize in advance, because throughout this, the more I have to say Saree's name, it will more than likely transition to me saying sorry, like a Canadian saying sorry. So I do apologize for that, because it happened a lot last week, will probably happen a lot this week. Doesn't take away from this matchup that happened. For the IWGP Women's title matchup, Sareee versus Alex Windsor. A big tie-up between the two to start things off, with both standing tall after a pair of arm drags. We get a Black Widow in the ring by Sareee that is transitioned onto the ground, and Windsor grabbing the bottom rope. We get a cannonball to the outside by Windsor. In the ring, a foot stomp by Sareee gets a 2 count. A Fisherwoman suplex does as well. We get a powerbomb into a sharpshooter by Windsor, with Sareee rolling up afterwards, and then a forearm exchange when they're both on their feet. It turns into a chop exchange that turns into an open hand slap exchange, so both competitors are fired up. Sareee delivers a pair of drop kicks and a double stomp off of the top rope that gets a close 2 count. Windsor's twisting suplex off of the top rope gets a close 2 count as well. The two battle on the top rope again, with Windsor delivering a Fisherwoman suplex that gets a very close 2 count, and then is transitioned to a sharpshooter in the center of the ring, with Sareee eventually grabbing the bottom rope. Then we get a pair of headbutts by Sareee and a double stomp that gets another close 2 count by Uranagi is landed afterwards, with the champion retaining, and it's different. Well, if you gotta pick between two very close things to be the highlight of the week, then it is good. So you can make your choice if the opening contest or the main event was the highlight of this week's ROH. Hopefully, we could do this every effing week. Have to make a choice like that. But overall, I do think a lot of people care about this week's ROH because of this main event matchup and the world title matchup in the opener. It's kind of an extra bonus. So we discussed a lot of things on this week's episode of ROH. Next week, we'll have to do the same, as I will more than likely have my Wrestle Dream predictions a part of it as well. So another good episode of ROH. Let's keep that going, as I'm trying not to burp. I kind of feel like I'm about to throw up. I'm not. I'm trying not to burp. I do appreciate y'all watching, though. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you when I see you, because I'm out for now. Go play Fight Forever as well. Bye-bye.